Sorry for the delay in the third video of the Precon upgrades for Modern Horizons 3. I had a little bit of vacation time I went out with my family on, but now I have the energy that I need to work on Creative Energy, the third Precon that I'm going to do a little upgrade video for. Now, this is the one that I kind of looked forward to the most when it came to these new Precons, because I was kind of let down by the Fallout Energy Precon, because it's just not my cup of tea. It's more of a control and wait and see type thing, whereas this is a little more aggressive. So let's take a look at this Precon now and see what we can do with it. First up is the Face Commander, Satya Aetherflux Genius. For one, a blue, a red, and a white, you get a human artificer with Menace and Haste. It's a 3/5 that says whenever it attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of one other target non-token creature you control, and you get 2 energy counters. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice the token unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. So we finally get our aggro energy commander. Dr. Medicine Leaf from Fallout was definitely not an aggro commander, and she's very slow to get going. All Satya asks is that you attack with him to get the energy, and then you get a bonus of copying anything off of him, and you get to keep the copy if it survives combat and you invest a little bit of energy into it. But even if you don't invest the energy, that kind of ability is still very good if you're copying things with things like ETB triggers or even death triggers, so that you'll get more of those triggers either when they come in or when they go out as you sacrifice the token. We'll discuss some ways to abuse this without paying the energy here in just a little bit. For now, our second new commander from the deck is Kaith, Famed Mechanist. For one, a blue, a red, and a white, you get a Dwarf Artificer. It's a 3/3 with Fabricate 1, so when energy, you can either put a counter on it or create a 1/1 servo. Other non-token creatures you control have Fabricate 1, so whenever they enter the battlefield, you get to do the same kind of effect. And she has the ability to pay 2 and tap, choose one, either Populate or Proliferate. Now, if you don't know what those are, Populate, you can copy a token on the battlefield, or you can Proliferate to get an additional counter on each thing that has a counter on it. So finally, for the first time in these precons, the secondary commander actually complements what the primary commander is trying to do without detracting from it or even having anything to do with what the other one wants to do. Because like the other commanders that I've covered out of the Modern Horizons 3, they don't really mesh. They don't want to accomplish the same goal. Kaith here, however, depending on how you want to use her, you can use the Proliferate option to boost your energy counters or any other counters in the deck for that matter, or you can use the Populate option to create a copy of the tokens created by Satya's attack trigger, and that copy that you create, you will not need to pay the energy for, since it wasn't created by the attack trigger, allowing you to pull energy off of Satya for other effects, and yet you get to keep a token off of it as well. The Fabricate function on this, however, is just a bonus unless you're really wanting to build around her and make it a token deck. For this, we're going to keep Satya at the front, and we're going to focus with our upgrades on that part of the deck. So our first upgrade, I'm going to say right now, I'm on the record of not wanting to give things to my opponents, and that means Silver Quill Lecturer needs to get out of this deck. This has the potential to bite you very, very hard, and the only way I would ever consider using this is if you are comfortable with playing heavy politics in a game of Commander, and that's how you want to play, using the temptation of the Demonstrate trigger to get an opponent to do you a favor or bribe them to team up during a game. Otherwise, no, it's just way too risky for my taste, and instead we're going to put a way to make Satya unblockable with Key to the City. Now, eventually, we're going to get into a situation where Satya just can't get into combat without risking him dying due to something like Death Touch or just creatures that are just too big for him to tangle with, even with the Menace. But we want to keep him swinging to get more energy and more token copying. So with Key, once we're in the late game, we can pitch a card to get him through and still have access to the possible card draw as a bonus off of this as well. And speaking of card draw, now, Tezzeret's Gambit is a fine card. The card draw, however, is fairly mediocre by today's standards, and proliferating once is just kind of eh. So ignoring the draw aspect, we're going to go for max proliferation potential, and I'm slotting in Inexorable Tide instead. Every spell that we drop after we play this will be able to proliferate our energy counters and any other ancillary counters we have floating around, making this a great play in the deck. The next cut is down to play preference and your play group. Now, you can keep this if you want to, but some groups kind of frown upon card theft, so I'm chopping Confiscation Coup from my variation of the deck. Also, I have other things I'd rather drop my energy on than a bad version of Control Magic, so instead, I'm going to dip into the Fallout Energy Precon, which will happen with some of our other selections. I'm going to pull an Automated Assembly Line. Now, this is something that I would much rather spend my energy on, getting an army of 3/3s online, which then gains us more energy as they swing at our opponents and hit them as the game wears on. And these can also be converted by Brutaclad, who's in the Precon, into something even nastier, like something you've copied with Satya the turn before and kept around. Much better possibilities with this card, and it gets the nod here. Now for the next card, I kind of want to bludgeon it to death as it's on its way out of the deck. Farewell is the kind of spell that as a new player, I'd question why I want to play Magic again. Seriously, Wizards, why do you keep reprinting this bastard card in Precons? Do you not want new players to stick around? On top of that, they missed a perfect opportunity here to slot in a new card from the main set that is a board wipe that plays with energy, and I'm going to fix that mistake here by bringing in Wrath of the Skies. Whatever you pay into the X, you get that much more energy, and then you can use your reserves to blow stuff up wholesale, or you can even be a little more circumspect and take out smaller stuff while leaving things like Satya alive and able to freely swing. Overall, this just feels a lot less bad than Farewell, and it's much more on theme with the deck. Next up on the chopping block is Skyclave Apparition. Now, this is a good card, but it's very limited in its applications since you only hit things with mana value 4 or lower. Instead, I'm going to go back into the main set. I'm going to grab one of the more thematic things in there with Static Prison. Now, this may seem like a downgrade since you have to maintain the prison with a little bit of energy each upkeep, but it's a lot easier to cast than Skyclave, only having a single white pip versus double white, and being able to target any non-land permanent regardless of mana value, and being on theme just makes this a better card for the deck in my eyes. And then we have what's basically been slotted into a blue Precon at almost every release for a while now, Bident of Thassa. It's a good card, but it's overused in these Precons. Instead, I want to make room for an enchantment of the same mana value, but in a different color, and coming from the main set, we have a card that has the name of a Magic set first in Aether Revolt. All the energy producers that are in this deck are going to add up over time, especially when you can get into large bursts of things like the Aethertide Whale that comes with the Precon. Hell, this thing can actually make Wrath of the Skies into a fireball as well as a board wipe, dealing damage equal to whatever you've paid into the X to get that energy. Ideally, you'd have a way to trigger Revolt and then gain energy in small bits, which would then trigger every time, dealing 2 additional damage each time. But either way, this is a win condition and a flavor win coming into the deck. Now, the next cut is a card that is popular to use in decks that are not in green as a mana fixer and accelerator. However, I have found more and more as of late that I just don't reach for this card as often as I once did because it is slow, and that card is actually Burnished Heart. 5 mana, even if you spread it out over a couple of turns, is a lot to get 2 lands on the board tapped. So if you're depending on this to get lands on a quote-unquote payment plan of cast this, crack it the next turn, and then have access to that mana the next turn, you've spent 3 turns getting to 2 extra mana. And that only works if it lives past the turn you cast it. Players with the ability to get rid of it before you can use it can set you back several turns of planned progression, and for that reason, I've lost love for this card. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and dip back into the Fallout Energy Precon and slot in Brotherhood Scribe. While this is not a mana dork, this is an energy dork. There are just a surprising amount of artifacts in this Precon, and we're actually going to add some in. And even though we've removed a few from the deck for these upgrades, it should be easy enough to hit the Metalcraft for the energy creation activation. But also it has a bonus that even if you can't hit the Metalcraft, every time you gain energy, your creatures get a temporary +1/+1 boost. So if you can chain off, 3, 4, 5 energy creation triggers in a turn, you can give your army of forces that many +1/+1 boosts and make life for your opponents much much more difficult. And then we have the last cut from our deck from the actual spells, and that is Whirler Virtuoso. While this is a good card for a quick burst of energy, and it was a good card in limited, that activated ability is quite pricey for just creating a 1/1 flyer. There are so many better things I want to spend my energy on than creating a Thopter for 3 energy apiece. So instead, we're going to use another main set inclusion with Guide of Souls. Now, this thing is actually kind of nutty. Every time a creature comes into play, you net you an energy counter and a life, and then you can pay 3 energy whenever anything we have attacks, not just the guide itself, making an attacker bigger and flying. So this is really good since we can use that to give Satya flying, virtually guaranteeing freedom to swing through and make tokens. Because how often do you see multiple flyers on an opponent's side of the board? Not very often, unless their deck is dedicated to flyers. And Guide of Souls is a great target for Satya's token creation. The first time you do it, you'll get 2 energy off the attack trigger, and then 1 coming off of the copy of the guide, making a new copy of itself. So you'll basically have free energy coming off of this, and then you can use that energy to keep your copy, and then you can start stacking up guides for multiplied energy production and +1/+1 counter spreading. I foresee this being a potent combination as long as you can keep those tokens alive. Now, normally I don't do much with the land bases of the precons, and I leave that to the preferences and the budget of the players, but a pair of lands caught my attention that I wanted to point out for this deck: Helios 1 and Rogue's Passage. Helios 1 is from the Fallout Energy precon, and it gives us a couple of functions in the deck. First, we can filter mana into it each turn to make an energy if we need to, but it also gives us removal on a stick for anything that isn't indestructible or a land without using a spell slot to do so. Rogue's Passage, on the other hand, gives us another way to make Satya unblockable as the game goes on and the menace gets outpaced, ensuring that our tokens and energy counters keep flowing. For this list, I removed Castle Vantress, since being in 3 colors reduces our chances of seeing this come into play untapped and having an island for it, and Prairie Stream, because there are so many non-basics in the deck that you're not likely going to have 2 basics on the battlefield for this to enter untapped anyways. Now, for the final bit here, I've been giving suggestions for the secondary commanders for the first couple Modern Horizons 3 precons, but since Kaith actually complements this deck pretty well, I'm instead going to just give you some upgrades that will make Satya much stronger. I just don't put them into the main upgrades because they are very pricey, and that is O'Hare Talk Deepest Foundation, Anointed Procession, and Mondrak Glory Dominus. Now, all these will double or triple token creation, and that includes the token copies created by Satya's attack trigger. Now, bear in mind, with the way the rules work, these are created by the trigger, all 3 of them or all 2 of them, depending on what you get. So all of your tokens created, you can pay energy to keep them, but they will have to be paid energy for it by the end of the turn, or they will have to be sacrificed because they're created off the trigger. Do with that information what you will. And that's what I have for you guys today. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Did I miss something that I should have included? Is there something you don't agree with in the inclusions here? Let us all know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, please like, share, comment, subscribe. All those things help my channel grow as I'm almost to my first 1,000 subscribers. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.